That's interesting because you assume what you're trying to preach.
What do you mean?
Insofar as the libertarian ideal of okay, well, you know, it's not my job to monitor speech or what we talk about. In fact, I'm going to teach it, and I'm going to defend by having kids sign that waiver at the beginning of class. You're assuming that that defense of liberty is already at hand, and by assuming it, you're defending it.
Well, that might be true if I actually came down and kind of preached libertarianism. But like when we study Mill in the class, one of the first things that we talk about in the class is whether or not freedom of speech, what it really entails, and whether or not we really should have it, right? And so I don't preach libertarianism. I show Mill's argument for libertarianism, and I show arguments against libertarianism and freedom of speech and against freedom of speech, right? And so it's all, I try my best at least not to actually assume anything, but I present both sides of the issue and let the student decide for themselves. At least that's the way I try to do it the best I can. But with the disclaimer itself, all I'm trying to do is warn people, actually, so that they know what's coming, and I have the right that they know what's coming, so that nobody can say, hey, I didn't want to watch that, I got offended by watching that, and you didn't tell me it was coming. You can say, well, you actually knew that what the episodes were about and stuff like that. So all I'm trying to do is kind of cover my own caboose, as it were, in that regard. But I don't think I'm begging the question or anything like that. But if you think we can talk more about that too. Yeah.
The episode about Oprah and her talking.
Right.
Is that are they just trying to poke fun at Oprah, or are they trying to show like America's susceptibility to cultural influence about her book, The Month Club, and also about like Tally's smoking habits?
And what was the last thing Tally did?
What's the significance of like Tally smoking weed and then
Yeah, you know, I'm not really sure. I've actually only watched that episode once because I wasn't that crazy about it. For those of you who don't know, it's this very strange South Park episode that features none of the boys. Kyle, Cartman, none of them are there. And it's just Tally. And if you don't know who Tally is, as you might guess, a towel that smokes weed. And always just walks around going, do you guys want to get high? And that's all he does. And he goes around saying that, and then warning people about towel safety and proper towel use. And in this episode, he decides to kind of get a job and get on the bandwagon. And he ends up putting out a book, right? That ends up having a bunch of lies in it, right? Which was analogous to something else that was going on in the media at that time. Oprah has him on the show, and it turns out to be all lies. But this whole time, Oprah's crotch and her butt are having this conversation with each other, right? Something like that. And the crotch like holds people up with the guts. Very, very strange episode. I think there's at least a little bit of social commentary about people kind of worshiping Oprah and whatever she says in the book club and stuff like that. But it's not a huge moral lesson like some of the other episodes. But I think there's at least a little bit of that going on. But man, what a strange episode that is.
Didn't that episode though question like the morality of that guy who was on Oprah's book club, and he wrote a book about being on drugs and stuff, and then none of it was true?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I got out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was that kind of like direct social commentary that he did something really clearly wrong. I guess the reason I don't think it's kind of as big a moral issue as some of the other ones is because everybody kind of already thought that. Right? Everybody realized whenever he lied about the book, everyone was very clearly going, well, that's a really bad thing to do. Right? It's not as big a message as like the free speech ones where people are like, have a real kind of gut inclination to say, oh no, you shouldn't show Muhammad as a cartoon because that will really upset people. And they say, no, you really should. When people threaten violence to get you to, to try to hinder free speech, you need to say it all the more to show them that they can't hinder free speech. It's a little bit more controversial in that way. But they're definitely, almost every episode except for maybe the Stanley Cup one has got a moral episode. Almost every. Ryan.
In the most recent run of episodes, they did an episode on the 9/11 conspiracy. I was never really clear on what they were trying to say. How do you think they feel about it? Like, what was the significance of comparing it to defecating in a urinal?
Well, right, so for those of you who haven't seen this episode, there's this big mystery. Somebody pooped in the urinal in the boys' school, and Mr. Mackey doesn't know who did it, and he's determined to find out who did. And he, for some strange reason, he keeps describing it in different ways, and every time he describes it, it keeps getting funnier. It's like, that's not funny. Think about how, you know, doing this and doing that. That's not funny. Of course, they think it's funny. And they bring in the Hartley boys, who are hardly boys, and they try to solve the mystery. Well, at the same time, Cartman keeps pushing everybody to think that, well, first of all, to think that Kyle is responsible for 9/11, not you know, pissed off terrorists, right? And so I think that they can't be comparing it to, like, well, who cares who put the turd in the urinal? Who cares if we did 9/11? I mean, clearly, you know, that is more important. I mean, very clearly. At least, okay, so let me answer the question this way. I'm not sure about the significance of the turd in the urinal. I really don't know if they're trying to make some kind of message there. But very clearly, the message of that episode was that conspiracy theories like 9/11 conspiracy theories or JFK conspiracy theories and that kind of stuff are just completely wacko. That they're people latching on to stuff like for the 9/11 conspiracy, it seemed to be something like people hate George W. Bush so much that if they have an opportunity to blame him for anything, like the 9/11 conspiracy, they'll jump at that opportunity. And they'll ignore evidence to the contrary and that kind of stuff, and they'll do it because they want to do it. And they make a great point about the kind of ridiculousness of the theories when they have George W. Bush admit that, okay, we did do it. All we had to do was, and he goes through this list of all these fine-tuned, intricate things. All we had to do was make sure all the planes were on the air, but the planes were actually empty. We had to report by remote control and make sure that all the other planes were out of the air. And he just goes this huge description of all the things that they had to do. And it was just the most intricate and precise plan executed by anywhere in the history of time ever. Right? And Stan just kind of replies this, really? Like, I mean, that's just the most ridiculous explanation you've ever seen, and you're supposed to actually buy it. In the episode, the government actually wants you to believe it's them because they want you to believe that they are so all-powerful that they can produce this kind of fake attack, as it were, or they can, you know, make it look like it's somebody else when it's really them, to make you think that they're all-powerful and can do anything. Right? But I mean, the moral of the episode, at least, I've rambled on. The moral of the episode is that clearly those things are crap. That's what essentially the moral is. I wish I knew the significance of the church. Anything else? I think it's a good place to stop. I will be happy, if you're really a fan, I'll be happy to sign, if you have a copy of the book, happy to sign my chapter if you want to. Of course, Dr. Irwin doesn't have a chapter, but he is the editor of the series, so if you want him to sign the book, I'm sure he'd be happy to. Hope I didn't volunteer you there. And thank you so much for coming. For my students who are here and want extra credit, I'll tell you what we'll do. Just come up here and sign the back of my manuscript here, and I will give you bonus points in the class. And that's it. Thank you guys so much for coming.